We continue now with the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, is with us. All right, so we went over repatriation. We're going to go 7 brackets to 3.
Right.
Okay, and we're going to have hopefully a between 15 and 20%. Right. And you've talked to Donald Trump about that. Obamacare is one of the first things on your agenda.
That is.
Transitioning from Obamacare to either health savings accounts.
Get to a patient-centered system where you buy what you want to buy. Obviously, we think health savings accounts is a huge component of that. You know who one of the best advocates for health savings accounts is in Congress? A guy named Tom Price.
Tom Price.
Who's about to become HHS Secretary. I co-authored the health savings account law in 2003. So we want to give people options and choices. We want competition and choice, which drives down prices and increases people's ability to buy what they want to buy. So yes, there will be a good transition so that no one has the rug pulled out from under them as we go from this dark day of Obamacare to a better system with lower prices and more choices. Here's the point we keep trying to make to people. It's getting worse with Obamacare. It is. And what
well, we see the prices going up. We see more and more carriers dropping out.
The biggest health insurance company in America, United, pulled out. Aetna pulled out. Double-digit premium increases. They're making the deductibles so high, it's not even like you have insurance in the first place. And what we anticipate coming in 2017 is more of that. So they actually say it's in a death spiral. That's the term they use for saying it is literally.
So here's the question. It took 6 full years to implement Obamacare. How many years will it take to transition off?
We're in the middle of trying to figure that out right now.
Will it be less than 2?
We're trying to figure that out. I hate sticking numbers on these things because we're trying to figure this out. Tom Price isn't even at HHS yet. So the Trump government isn't even stood up yet. So those people who will be integral in making this work and be successful aren't even in those positions yet. That's why what we want to do is bring relief immediately. We're going to work on our repeal legislation immediately. And then we have to make sure that there's that good transition period so that people don't have the rug pulled out from under them. And then we can bring relief as quickly as possible.
My biggest concern, and people that call my radio show and write me on a regular basis, they seems to be their biggest concern, is $1 trillion for infrastructure. You were asked on 60 Minutes, how are you going to pay for it? And immediately after you were on, there was a guy that brought businesses to the Golden Triangle in Mississippi.
Yeah.
Joe Maxigan.
Yeah, I watched that segment.
It was great, right?
It was private sector.
It was private sector, but he'd make deals with the government. They'd build roads, sewers, and even a power grid to bring a steel mill into their town. It's created over 13,000 jobs, and revenue to the government went way up. My question is, how do you spend $1 trillion of infrastructure? And how do you pay for it?
So here's the key. That $1 trillion isn't just the money from hardworking taxpayers through the federal government. That money is leveraged money that is in the private sector. So what we want to do is leverage private sector dollars with public-private partnerships so that people put private money into rebuilding our airports, improving our infrastructure. There are a lot of innovative ideas out there to leverage private dollars.
It's not $1 trillion government.
It's not Washington spending $1 trillion.
How much will Washington spend?
That's something we're also going to be figuring out and negotiating as we go. But the goal here isn't just to take taxpayer money and throw it at big government programs. The goal here is to leverage resources in the private sector so that the private sector produces lean, mean, efficient, and on-time infrastructure. Look, if you take $1 of infrastructure spending and spend it through the Washington system, you know, cents on the dollar goes to the actual road to making the improvement. We have to clean up that mess, by the way, which this administration, the Obama administration, has made worse. But we also, if you take $1 that is spent by the private sector in private investment, so much more gets actually done in the construction.
I would argue if it goes through the D.C. bureaucracy and you got 535 guys fighting for it.
We don't want to pork this up. We don't want this to be bureaucracy. We want this to be private sector direction. We want this to be private sector leverage, and so that we can have better jobs, more money going into the economy to infrastructure, and don't do it through some big Washington knows best program.
Why do I believe that America more than ever, especially I would argue that OPEC, Saudi Arabia, the Middle East, purposely manipulated the price of energy to drive out of business some of these fracking companies and others. How quickly will you put on the agenda America, energy independence? How fast?
Day one. This is what we're working with the transition team on. So I think there's a very legitimate point you're making there, which was the American energy renaissance that could be there for us, but for our government, was threatening to OPEC and threatening to other energy producers. We are sitting on a store of oil and gas that is tremendous. America, this country can be the dominant producer in the world. Think of what that does for jobs. Think of what that does for our prices, for heating our homes, and
every car could be
our
driven on
industrial
gas.
parks and electricity, and you name it.
Cars can be.
And think what it does for our foreign policy.
Yeah, we're not dependent.
Selling Europe our gas instead of having to buy it from Russia. So it's fantastic for foreign policy, for jobs, for everything, but for our government. So what we're working with the transition team is, what can they do immediately on day one to clear this, what we call regulatory underbrush, to clear all the barriers that the Obama administration put up?
Wipe them out.
Get rid of them.
Get
rid of them. And then what do we need to do when they get better people in place in the administrative branch to clean up regulations that they couldn't through sort of executive orders and the rest? And then what do we need to do legislatively to deal with these barriers? So we're working hand in glove with the transition team as to what is it they can do administratively, what is it we need to do. This is a day one project starting right away to get this energy renaissance underway.